Sinus tachycardia is the supraventricular tachycardia all supraventricular tachycardias are contrasted with, given it's the only one that may be physiologic. That's not to say there are no pathological causes of increased automaticity of the SA node, simply that sinus tachycardia is more likely to arise as a consequence of a systemic condition such as hypovolemic shock than for a disease intrinsic to the heart. Atrial tachycardia is a regular supraventricular tachycardia in which a high-frequency electrical stimulus for contraction is being generated in a single site of the atria outside of the SA node. In our example here, it's clearly coming from a cluster of cells in the left atrium. Since it is atrial, we can see discernible P waves in the EKG, and since it's a single site, there will be monomorphic P waves. However, these may be abnormal since they do not originate in the SA node, thus it's different from sinus tachycardia. Atrial flutter is a regular supraventricular tachycardia marked usually by narrow QRS complexes and 250 to 350 F waves per minute, the characteristic sawtooth waves analogous to P waves. It's caused by re-entry circuits entirely within the atria, typically the right one, which thus causes the atria to be always undergoing depolarization and repolarization somewhere. This is why we have F waves constantly going up or down. Since the AV node cannot conduct so fast, only some waves will be forwarded to the ventricles. Junctional tachycardia is a regular supraventricular tachycardia in which increased AV node and/or AV junction automaticity causes it to supplant the SA node, or, plainly speaking, the atrioventricular node starts emitting electrical impulses faster than the SA node and takes over as the heart pacemaker. Since the atria are now depolarizing retrogradely, inverted P waves may be seen. Atrioventricular nodal reentry tachycardia, or AVNRT for short, is a long but very descriptive name for a paroxysmal regular supraventricular tachycardia. As the name suggests, it originates from the formation of a reentrant circuit within the AV node. Some people have more than one nodal pathway for electrical impulses going from the atria to the ventricles. The problem happens when a P wave from a premature atrial contraction hits them while one is refractory and the other is not. This may cause the one with the longer refractory period to become the retrograde limb of a reentry loop. Atrioventricular reentrant tachycardia, AVRT, not to be confused with AVNRT, is also a paroxysmal regular supraventricular tachycardia caused by the formation of a reentry loop. However, it differs from AV nodal reentrant tachycardia in the reentrant circuit location, which in this case encompasses an accessory pathway from atria to ventricles. This accessory pathway usually manifests itself simply as ventricular pre-excitation. However, given the right circumstances, it may become the retrograde limb for a reentry circuit. Put bluntly, if electrical impulses can find a shortcut from the ventricles back to the atria, a loop is formed and the heart basically short-circuits. When symptomatic, the phenomenon can be classified as Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. Atrial fibrillation is the most common irregular supraventricular tachycardia, marked by disorganized electrical activity in the atria, aka absence of P waves, and thus disorganized atrial contraction. Multiple, hundreds of impulses course unpredictably throughout the atria, causing its fibers to contract erratically instead of in tandem. Atrial contraction is therefore uncoordinated and ineffective, often described as quivering. Only some of these impulses will be forwarded to the ventricles by the AV node though, depending on how fast it can conduct them, determining the AFib ventricular response. Multifocal atrial tachycardia is an irregular supraventricular tachycardia in which high-frequency electrical stimuli for contraction are being generated outside of the SA node in multiple sites or foci of the atria, thus multifocal. Since the sites are all within the atria, we will see discernible P waves in the EKG. However, contrary to unifocal atrial tachycardia, since these waves are being generated in many different cell clusters all around, the P waves will be different from each other in shape, polymorphic, and often in frequency, making the rhythm irregular. Atrial tachycardia and atrial flutter are supraventricular tachycardias that usually present as regular rhythms. However, remember that atrial rate dysarrhythmias may reach upwards of 300 beats per minute, and the AV node is not capable of conducting so fast. So, only some P waves will be forwarded to the ventricles, 1 in 3 for example. What if, though, our AV node conduction is not regular but varies? In the presence of variable conduction, aka variable AV block, atrial tachycardia and flutter may present as irregular supraventricular tachycardias. Ventricular fibrillation is a ventricular tachycardia and a cardiac arrest shockable rhythm at that. Similarly to atrial fibrillation, the occurrence of disorganized electrical activity throughout the ventricles, hundreds of electrical impulses originating and coursing aimlessly along the ventricular walls, causes them to contract erratically. Ventricular contraction will happen extremely fast, yet even more uncoordinatedly, to the point it's worthless in pushing blood forward out of the heart. Thus, why it's seen in cardiac arrest. Furthermore, with chaotic ventricular electrical activity, no QRS complexes will be seen. Polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, as clearly stated in the name, is a ventricular tachycardia, meaning the electrical impulses that cause rapid ventricular contraction are originating in the ventricles and will thus have wide QRS complexes. Furthermore, given that the impulses are being generated by multiple different ventricular foci, as implied by the wording polymorphic, QRS complexes will vary in form, shape. In fact, the complexes will often alternate, creating a sinusoidal pattern. When manifested as a complication of QT interval prolongation rather than myocardial ischemia, it's called torsade de pointe, or twisting of the edges. Monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, as well as all ventricular tachycardias, is caused by rapid electrical impulses originating ectopically in the ventricle, and thus produces wide QRS complexes. However, as the term monomorphic implies, these complexes are all equal in shape, suggesting they originated in the same site. And indeed they did, usually from the formation of a re-entry circuit in the ventricular wall due to a previous fibrous scar. Occasionally, an atrial stimulus may reach the ventricles while they are repolarized and generate a capture or fusion beat. Idioventricular rhythm is the intrinsic rate of the ventricles, what we would see as an escape rhythm if the ventricles are left unstimulated. Accelerated idioventricular rhythm is a unique tachycardia classically associated with successful myocardial reperfusion, in which increased automaticity of ventricular cells causes them to depolarize faster than the usual 30 to 40 beats per minute. If the new rate is faster than the SA node, they will temporarily become the new pacemaker. And since we are talking about a ventricular focus, morphologically, it will present itself akin to a monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, just not as fast. Sinus bradycardia is the phenomenon of low heart rhythm due to decreased sinoatrial node automaticity. That is, cardiac frequency is low not because of any conduction problems, but rather because the SA node is not emitting electrical impulses as often as it should. This could be physiologic and completely normal in young athletes, for example, due to increased parasympathetic tone, but it can also mark a bradyarrhythmia characterized by SA node dysfunction and or degeneration. A first-degree ventricular block, or heart block for short, is a bradyarrhythmia characterized by a lengthened PR interval, longer than 200 milliseconds. This just means that it takes longer for ventricular depolarization QRS complex to begin after atrial depolarization P wave, or, in practical terms, that the electrical stimulus that left the atria is taking longer to traverse the AV node than it should. Contrary to other heart blocks, though, the stimuli are never actually blocked, only slowed. A Mobitz type 1 atrioventricular block is a type of second-degree heart block. Second-degree heart blocks are characterized by conduction of some, but not all, electrical stimuli through the atrioventricular node, and the Mobitz 1 or Van-Quebec bradyarrhythmia distinctively presents as progressively lengthening PR intervals until a P wave gets blocked and the cycle begins anew. Notice on the animation that each P wave leaving the atria faces more resistance in the AV node and takes longer to traverse it until finally the AV node fails the last wave and does not forward it to the ventricle, leading to a missed beat. A Mobitz type 2 atrioventricular block is a type of second-degree heart block. Second-degree heart blocks are characterized by conduction of some but not all electrical stimuli through the atrioventricular node. In Mobitz 2 bradycardia, P waves leaving the atria get blocked in the AV node out of the blue erratically with no preceding event that could allow for predictability over which waves will be blocked. This is not to say there can be no fixed ratio between P waves and QRS complexes, but rather that the block is not preceded by PR interval changes. A 2-to-1 atrioventricular block is a bradyarrhythmia in which the atrioventricular node conducts only one out of every two electrical stimuli that arrive at it. As you can see here, the first P wave gets blocked at the AV node and thus does not generate a QRS. Consequently, there is no ventricular contraction following the atrial contraction. It's a second-degree heart block because you are skipping QRSs, however, we call it a 2-to-1 because since there aren't two consecutive conducted P waves, it's hard to determine if we are looking at a Mobitz 1 or Mobitz 2 heart block. A complete heart block or third-degree atrioventricular block is a bradyarrhythmia in which the atrioventricular node does not conduct any electrical stimulus whatsoever. Consequently, atria and ventricles become completely dissociated and will beat in their own rhythm with no regard to each other. Here we can see the P waves causing atrial contraction 90 times per minute simply do not reach the ventricles. The ventricles therefore revert to the intrinsic automaticity of the infranodal system, beating 36 times per minute in our example, thus the low heart rate. Sinoatrial block is a bradyarrhythmia characterized by dropped or skipped beats. Essentially, the SA node fails to conduct one or more electrical impulses to the atria, generating no P waves. Thus, a short pause is seen on the EKG with no electrical activity. Normal sinus rhythm is then resumed once the SA node goes back to work as if nothing had happened. This is analogous to what happens in atrioventricular blocks. Sinoatrial arrest is a bradyarrhythmia characterized by dropped or skipped beats. Essentially, the SA node stops working for a brief period, ceasing to emit electrical impulses. Consequently, we cease having P waves, which is seen on the EKG as a pause. Eventually, another heart site with slower automaticity, such as the AV node, may seize the opportunity and start imposing an escape rhythm to the heart. Hi, thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. I think this is a video I could say quite literally put my heart into making. It was quite fun to draw and animate all of these different heart arrhythmias, and if you're interested in medical review and medical content in general, maybe stay around because more will come. And by the way, if you think I post too seldom here on YouTube, maybe check my Instagram because I often post previews there. Thank you for sharing your time to me, and I hope to see you on the next video.